Hello, this is Coding Gicha for full-stack developers. This article will cover how to install PHP packages on Windows and manage their status. PHP packages are broadly categorized into extension modules and dependency modules. Let's start by covering the management of extension module packages. The extension module package is installed in the directory where PHP is installed, so it is a global package that can be used in all projects. On Linux, PHP is installed by downloading source files from a repository, and extension modules for PHP are also installed by downloading the required extension module source files from the repository. However, on Windows, the PHP installation file is typically downloaded as a pre-built compressed file, including all extension modules. Therefore, on Windows, instead of installing PHP extension modules, you load them by uncommenting the extension modules you want to use. Open the php.ini file. Since Windows lacks a CLI environment, I'll configure it using the GUI editor Sublime Text. Ini files don't support color syntax by default, so I'll install the ini package for Sublime Text. On Windows, PHP extension modules are managed in the X directory under the home directory of your PHP installation. Let's open that directory in File Explorer to check. The PHP extension module DLL files are named with a naming pattern that begins with the PHP_ prefix. For example, the curl extension module file is php_curl.dll. Most PHP extension modules are pre-built, but for those not included, such as Xdebug, you can download the pre-built DLL file for the relevant PHP extension module to the X directory under your PHP installation. This allows you to configure it with just the file name rather than the full path. The pre-built PHP extension modules managed in the X directory are declared in the php.ini file. Uncomment the PHP extension module you want to use to load it. Loading all PHP extension modules can lead to performance degradation, memory waste, security risks, and system instability issues. Therefore, loading only the necessary extension modules is recommended for optimal performance. Since you downloaded and installed the Xdebug extension module directly, you must load it using the DLL file name, not the extension module name. The Xdebug extension module also requires additional configuration. Since Xdebug listens on port 9300, debugging must be running. However, for simple development, simply checking the error log is sufficient. Let's check the PHP log in real time. Let's open a PHP page in a web browser. Even if no errors occur, an error will be logged in the error log. An error will appear stating that the debugging client on port 9300 timed out. You can ignore this error and continue developing, but it's still a concern. If you're developing lightly in PHP and only use Xdebug for detailed debugging, disabling Xdebug can be useful. Comment out the Xdebug extension module and related settings in the php.ini file. You need to restart the Apache HTTP server service for the settings to take effect. You can restart the Apache HTTP server using the Apache HTTP server monitor running in the system tray. Early in development, you'll probably restart Apache HTTP server to reflect the settings. However, once you're fully developed, the settings will be completely set, so restarting Apache HTTP server is rare. Here I've divided the settings into sections for explanation, so restarting Apache HTTP server was frequent. However, during the early stages of actual development, you'll likely complete all the settings at once and restart Apache HTTP server once or twice. Even though I rarely use the Apache HTTP server monitor, I find it distracting to have the vibrant icon in the system tray constantly visible. I'll disable the Apache HTTP server monitor during startup. Since the Apache HTTP server monitor is already running, the vibrant icon will still be visible in the system tray, but it will no longer appear after rebooting the operating system. I personally prefer restarting services through the services. I'll pin the services to start. This also extends the monitoring capabilities beyond Apache HTTP server services, allowing you to monitor other services as well. However, since I won't be using it very frequently, I'll pin it to start rather than the taskbar. I'll run services from start. I'll restart Apache 2.4. Let's scroll down to distinguish it from the previous log. Let's refresh the PHP page. Now, the debugging client connection timeout error should no longer occur. To enable or disable PHP extension modules, you need to open the php.ini file in a text editor, locate the module, and comment out the relevant information. Then, you need to restart the Apache HTTP server service in the GUI configuration window. This is a bit cumbersome and messy. On the other hand, on Linux, you can enable or disable PHP extension modules using the module management command. This entire process can be done with CLI commands, and it can also be automated using shell scripts. PHP extension modules are global PHP packages. This section explains how to install and manage local PHP packages for each project. Composer is a dependency manager. Let's configure the Composer installation. The curl extension module must be enabled. Composer must be installed in a directory set in the path environment variable. On Windows, system-related executables are stored in the Windows \system 32 inches directory. Managing local executables alongside system-related executables doesn't seem like a good idea, so I personally use a separate directory to manage user executables. The PHP installation directory must also be set in the path environment variable to enable PHP commands. Click the download button. Instructions for installing by running the script in the terminal will appear. The install button might be more appropriate than the download button. Copy the command line installation script. You can paste it into the Windows terminal and run it. In this case, I'll run Terminus from Sublime Text and work in the integrated terminal. Move to the directory specified in the path environment variable, which I checked earlier in the system environment variables. Paste the copied script. Lines with line breaks will be executed immediately after pasting. The last line, without a line break, is waiting for the enter key. The composer.far file has been added. I'll create a composer.bat file that will execute the composer.far file. I'll use Composer to install a package that allows to read and write spreadsheet files like Excel. PHP spreadsheet requires the file info, GD, string, and zip extension modules. Since Composer is a dependency manager, I'll launch Visual Studio Code to work within the project folder. I'll launch the integrated terminal panel. I'll navigate to the www secondary domain source folder. You could create a package here, but external users would be able to directly access and open package-related files. To deny access, I'll create a dependencies directory and work within it. I'll deny access to the dependencies directory later. I'll install PHP spreadsheet using Composer require. The Composer install command is used to install, but since the composer.json file is required, I'll use the Composer require command to install it. The Composer require command will create the composer.json file if it doesn't already exist and install it. Let's check the dependencies directory. A composer.json file and a vendor directory have been created. Opening the composer.json file will show you the installed packages and their versions. Directories related to Composer and PHP spreadsheets have been created in the vendor directory. You can load and work with dependency packages by requiring the autoload.php file from PHP source code. I'll deny access to files in the dependencies directory. Open the virtual host configuration file in the Apache Conference directory. Installing the Sublime Text Apache Conference package will apply color syntax, but I'll skip that part here due to time constraints. Since the file extension alone doesn't distinguish between regular conference files and Apache Conference files, you'll need to change the file type to Apache Conference every time you open an Apache Conference file. Explaining this could disrupt your workflow, so I'll skip it here. I'll deny access to the dependencies directory for the www.gicha.org development site. I'll restart the Apache 2.4 service for the settings to take effect. Updating packages installed with Composer can be done simply with a command. Removing unused packages can also be done simply with a command. The PHP spreadsheet information has been removed from the composer.json file. The PHP spreadsheet related directories have also been removed from the vendor directory. Thank you for watching.